Hello again. Hello. Thank you for stopping by for today's birthday bash reading. I'm doing a reading from Werewolf's Tale on a Druid Sword, my August 31st release, which was a couple weeks ago. It is the second book in the Ion series, and I chose a little excerpt today. It's between Beck and his little brother Jude. The book is about Jude and his journey, but Beck and Diego are still in the story, and they still have a POV, but they're more side characters that are interwoven into um, the plot for this book. And for those who have asked before, what I intend for the series is for Beck and Diego, because it is Diego's plot arc, and the plot arc is about Hector, who is Diego's brother. That is the overall arc for the series, but because of the type of enemy that they're facing, they need help, and instead of doing a book about Beck and Diego and then doing a sequel with a lot of telling into it about the side characters, we're showing their story and how it's going to interlock with the overall plot arc to help Beck and Diego do what they need to do to get Hector back. And Jude and Levi are integral to that. And the next book is will also have two other characters that will be helping Beck and Diego, but the fourth book will go back with Beck and Diego being primary instead of secondary characters with points of view. So the plot is so intricate. I had to weave these people into Beck and Diego's life and show instead of tell. So I'm hoping you'll like it. This is a set with Beck, Diego, and Jude. It's after a parkour run, and Jude runs across some werewolves, and he panics and he runs from them, which is not a good thing. You shouldn't really do that. And he gets to Beck and Diego and realizes that there's somebody in the group of werewolves that he might know, and kind of changes his mind about wanting to run from them because it looks like Levi, somebody's been missing in his life, and it'll tell a little bit in the excerpt about why, for a little while now, and it kind of broke Jude's heart, and so he wants to go back, and Beck and Diego are like, no, you need to explain what happened. And this is from after the werewolves go away, and Jude then has to explain what happens, and him and Beck relationship kind of clashes at this point, because they are seeing two very different sides of the issue, and so you'll see that it's going to be fun. And this is going to be because that was 4 minutes of me talking, and this is going to be about 20 minutes long, so I apologize, it's kind of long. That's third person, he stalled as he mentally put together his story. Jude pulled the fresh garment over his head, walked into the coffee shop, and bought a liter of water and an iced coffee. By the look on their faces, Beck and Diego knew he purposely delayed, but he refused to be rushed. Locating a secluded corner, Jude sat down and gulped his water. "It's my fault," he started. "I was running the course and others joined me. You know how it goes. After a while I noticed a couple of werewolves and I panicked. Instead of running with them, I ran away from them. I know I shouldn't have, but by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late." we were locked into the chase. They didn't mean anything by it. They did what they'd naturally do. Do you know how dangerous that was? Beck scrubbed a hand over his face. Diego only stared at him. He didn't believe Diego bought the bullshit he just spewed. Jude had told the truth, essentially. He just didn't tell them the werewolves worked to close him in. A driving instinct urged him to protect Levi. Beck hated werewolves, and Jude knew from listening to their discussions that Diego's reputation with the werewolves didn't endear them to him either. Jude didn't want his brother to use the werewolf's behavior as an excuse to go after the pack, not when the pack had someone Jude wanted. Jude drank the rest of the water and sipped the iced coffee, furiously searching for a way to ease Diego and Beck into what he saw about the without tempers getting the better of them. And in there, Diego prodded his sharp eyes regarding Jude carefully. Jude winced. He'd hoped they'd thought he'd been wound up about the chase. From their expressions, he considered withholding who was with the werewolves. Even now, he wanted to doubt himself, looking across the table at his brother and Diego. He didn't want to lie either. Evade their questions, yes, but not lie outright. I thought I recognized one of them, he confessed sullenly, unsure he was doing the right thing, afraid of what they'd do, what Ion would do. Was Levi the one still communicating with his family, or did Ion have something to do with those emails? If so, then why? If he told Beck and Diego, wouldn't that be the same as telling Ion? But then again, Ion possibly knew already. Jude was frustrated and confused, and he wanted to trust his brother. You know one of them. Why would you call Levi's name? Beck scowled, his dislike of the werewolves evident in how he spoke of them. He imagined Beck only saw the worst of the species, and that colored his view of all werewolves. His brother constantly pressed upon Jude how dangerous they were. Who did you think you saw? Diego pushed when Jude didn't answer Beck. Jude ducked his head and took that leap of faith. Levi, he whispered. He immediately wished he could take it back. By the expression on Beck's face, he knew he shouldn't have said anything at all. What do you mean you thought you saw Levi? Beck barked, his scowl dark and foreboding. You know what? Never mind. I'm mistaken. Forget about it. Anxiety washed through him, and Jude stood to leave, but Beck grabbed his wrist in a steely grasp. You don't get to do this, Beck hissed. Diego attempted to intercept, but Beck ignored him. You run to us terrified, chased by werewolves, then you freak out when they leave? Now you tell us that one of them could be Levi? What the hell happened out there? Jude tugged on his arm, anger and a sense of betrayal twisting in his gut. Sorry to bother you, he bit back. It won't happen again. Jude wrenched his arm from Beck's grasp. That isn't what I meant. Please, sit back down. The harshness of Beck's expression slid off his face, replaced by one of regret. Beck grimaced when Jude stepped out of his reach, and then sighed heartily. I'm worried, okay? And none of this is making sense. And you think it makes sense to me? You're the professional here. I'm just the gimp who tags along when you practice. Look, do what you want. I'm going home. I have a class in 2 hours and plans for tonight. Wrapping his anger around him like a cloak, Jude stormed out of the coffee shop without waiting for a reply. He was running from himself as much as from his brother. He should have stayed and talked, but he was hurt as much as he was furious, mad at Beck for questioning his word. He needed to turn the emotions off before he could speak civilly to Diego or his brother. He didn't want to fight and argue. Besides, all he seemed to have were more frustrating questions. What do I really know? Could the man be someone who merely resembled Levi? Jude had seen Levi sporadically over 3 years, and this past year not at all. People changed physically as they grew older. Well, they didn't normally change into werewolves. The bigger issue was that Levi was supposed to be deployed overseas. and he emailed his mother less than 30 days ago. Or had he? If Jude remembered correctly, turned werewolves frequently forgot their past and people in their lives after their first change. As far as Jude knew, werewolves didn't serve in the military. They were too unstable and would be unavailable 3 nights of the full moon. They needed the balance of the pack. Why the subterfuge with the misleading emails? Why was someone pretending to be Levi? How had Levi gotten back to the United States? Why wasn't his family told? Could they even tell Levi's family what happened to him? Jude hailed a cab and handed over an outrageous fare to go home. It was a small price to pay for a little peace and quiet. Calculating how soon the guys would be home, Jude grabbed what Beck called the monster book and started flipping pages. He shouldn't snoop, but he doubted he'd be allowed to borrow it. He desperately needed answers. The werewolf section was pitifully lacking in details. Were there female werewolves? How many members were in a pack? How was a pack run? Was there an alpha? Where did they go on the night of the full moon? How was the pack governed? Were humans or other races a part of the pack? What he did find out was how a person was turned into a werewolf. When in wolfman form, on the 3 nights of the full moon, the werewolf's bite could make a human sick. To turn someone, a series of bites that transferred enough of the virus would start the change in the person bitten. They would become ill as the toxin ravaged their body until they transformed at the next full moon. Sometimes the infection killed the individual if they were in poor health or not strong enough. For those who volunteered to be changed, the werewolves must gain authorization from the ruling council. If someone was bitten and changed without permission, then the werewolf responsible would be judged a rogue and put down. If the humans survived the transformation, the council would arrange for a transfer to a new pack for the safety of the newly changed. New werewolves forgot parts of, or not, if not most of their former lives. The memories of some were wiped to the point they even forgot their names. The newborns were notoriously harder to control because their struggle with their wolf self was more strenuous than a born werewolf's. They didn't grow up in the pack's strict discipline of lifelong cohabitation of man and wolf. Turned werewolves were more volatile and violent. It was imperative they find a mate to help them gain the balance between their wolf and man. If they didn't, then they typically turned rogue and had to be put down. A 5-year survival rate was 50%, and then every year afterwards the rate decreased by 10%. In some cases, the werewolves burnt themselves out, sort of like internal combustion, where they would fall over dead for no apparent reason. Dazed, Jude put the book back and went to take a shower. He peeled off his pants. Dried blood had pasted the material to his skin. He had expected it to hurt as the cloth came away from the wound, but there was nothing. No pain, no wound. There was blood, his blood, he was sure. He remembered the piercing pain as he'd rolled on the dirty alley floor, yet there were no signs other than the stains that he'd been injured. But Jude's worry wasn't on how fast he apparently healed, but on sorting out what happened with Levi. Surely Levi didn't volunteer to be a werewolf. With the probability of him forgetting everything, not a chance. Levi was always level-headed and rational. He wouldn't willingly submit to something like that. Then he had to have been bitten by a rogue. When? Where? Was that why someone was feeding Levi's parents false information? How cruel. Levi would never be able to go back home. Why hadn't the Marines, Ion, reported him dead? There was no reason for the deception, was there? His first impulse was to speak to Beck, but after what was said earlier, he discarded the idea. Jude didn't want to argue with his brother. Besides, Beck and Diego were probably already hashing over the different scenarios of Levi's turning. They were the professionals. Jude wasn't. He should leave fact-finding up to them. Jude heard Beck and Diego come home. He mulled over what he'd learned and the gaping holes where the data had been missing. He tugged on clean clothes and grabbed his book bag. Beck pounced on him before he made it out the front door. Jude, wait. Beck doggedly followed him. I am sorry for my reaction earlier with your identification of Levi as a werewolf. That will open up channels for an investigation. If it is him, we'll find out what happened. You'll be able to put Levi behind you once and for all. Anticipation washed through Jude. Beck believed him. They would find Levi. I don't know what we'll be able to do for him. Jude slumped, leaning against the wall when his knees threatened to give out. But the full weight of the rest of Beck's statement slapped Jude in the face. Why should I put him behind me when I want him back in my life? No, Jude, he's not who he used to be. He's not human, not a man. He's been turned into a creature, a violent animal. He more than likely doesn't remember who he is, much less who you are. Beck's voice held understanding, but his expression had hardened. No, he knows me, Jude insisted. Perhaps it was wishful thinking, but hadn't the werewolf held out his hand beckoning to Jude as if he knew him? That had to mean something, didn't it? Maybe Levi didn't remember everything about who he was, who he used to be, but Jude had looked into those familiar eyes and he couldn't imagine that Levi had forgotten him completely. Could he be reading too much into the situation? Was the hope of having Levi back making him see things that weren't there? Beck grabbed Jude's arms and shook him. No, he doesn't know you, and he would have contacted you. Listen to me. If he's a werewolf, he's not the same person he was before. He'll be violent, he'll hurt you and not mean to. He's not a monster, Jude yelled. Needing to defend Levi, he jerked his arms out of Beck's grip. I know he's different. What if he was wrong, and the werewolf wasn't Levi at all? He had a moment of doubt after the werewolves had left. Had the conversation of the night before dredged up emotions and desires he'd kept locked down, caused him to see Levi when it was only some other poor soul? Not just different, Jude. The Levi you knew no longer exists. He's gone, and there is nothing you can do to bring him back. You can't save him because he's no longer there to be saved. Jude felt like Beck had hit him. He searched high and low for a reason why Levi had broken all contact so abruptly. He had swallowed the email sent to Levi's parents like a sour pill. He hadn't wanted to believe, and there had been no way for him to dispute the validity of the messages without calling Levi's parents liars. No matter what evidence was given to him, something niggled at him. My werewolf, he is mine, whispered the voice Jude heard in his dreams. A normal person would be afraid, but he wasn't normal, was he? Wasn't that the purpose of Beck and Diego's talk the night before, a way to let him know they knew he was different? Or was he just fucking nuts? He'd spent the last year pretending he didn't dream of another lifetime, another him, and now, for his own peace of mind, he wanted to embrace it. He saw a special light around people, sometimes remembered ancient knowledge. Either Beck and Diego were right and this was some kind of hereditary thing, or the therapist was correct and he should be taking antipsychotics. Jude was tired of second-guessing himself, of being afraid of what others thought of him. Staring at Beck's anguished expression, as if he could feel Jude's internal chaos, Jude chose to embrace the voice. The werewolf was Levi, and Levi hadn't left him, not intentionally. According to the monster book, Levi would have been taken away from his former life and inserted into the pack. Levi was somewhere within the city, and he needed Jude. Beck didn't understand. Jude refused to believe that what they had together could be erased. If you see him again, you can't go near him, Beck ordered. Jude hefted the pack onto his shoulder and opened the door. Beck shoved it closed. Don't walk away. Promise me. Swear you won't leave with him if he comes around again. Please tell me you won't try to find him. Packs Werewolves are dangerous. They're volatile, violent, and short-tempered. Humans don't mix with them, and when they do, they come out battered or worse, dead. Beck's voice dropped to a whisper. For all intents and purposes, Levi's dead, Jude. He stared into his brother's eyes, crushed. Beck would believe Levi would harm him. Jude reminded himself Beck dealt with werewolves through Ion, and only saw the worst of the species. He could see his brother believed what he said with all his heart. Jude shook his head, refusing to paint all werewolves with one brush. They all couldn't be bad, could they? And that is the excerpt for A Werewolf's Tale and A Druid's Sword. My favorite book of Ion so far. And I think what I was thinking the other day was that every book in this series gets a little better for me. And I really, really loved writing Jude in his character. And so this kind of made Werewolf's Tale my favorite Ion book so far. And if Stephen's book is like this, then Stephen might steal the show. So I hope you liked the reading, and we will see you tomorrow again for the next birthday bash readings. And you have a good day. We'll talk to you later.